and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on this beautiful Tuesday evening. So we're very excited to get started and having the conversation tonight. But before I get into that, I will be doing a land acknowledgement. So the Waterloo Region Crime Prevention Council exists and operates on the Haldimand Tract. The land promised to the Haudenosaunee of the Six Nations of the Grand River and is the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. We acknowledge that historic and current colonization practice continues to disproportionately affect Indigenous peoples throughout Turtle Island. The recent discovery of the 215 children buried in Kamloops, followed by the discovery of 104 bodies in Manitoba, 38 in Regina, Saskatchewan, and 35 in Lestock, Saskatchewan, is a painful reminder of the ways the colonial state of Canada has and continues to engage in displacement, genocide, and forced assimilation. This is not a dark chapter of our past, but a continuing reality for Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the experiences of Indigenous peoples, Black people, and people of color intersect but are very different. Histories, cultures, and colonial aspects position us in relation to each other and build further appreciation to the land that sustains us all. However, it is important for all communities to be unapologetic and loud in their solidarity with Indigenous peoples and to continue to listen, advocate, and center the voices of Indigenous members in our communities. We are grateful for the generous involvement of everyone involved in the Upstream speaker series. We sincerely hope these events inspire equity-based improvements in all of our communities' safety and well-being. So again, welcome everyone to tonight's event. Very, very excited to be here. There was a lot of hard work that was put behind the scenes, and there are amazing people also behind the scenes right now helping us make this event smooth and effective throughout the night. My name is Shama Saleh. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Crime Prevention Council currently, and I will be the host of tonight's event. So before I get into the event, I will be giving a very brief background of the Crime Prevention Council. So at Crime Prevention Council, we envision a safe, equitable, and just community where everyone has access to opportunities to thrive. So at CPC, it consists of 40 members who represent a very broad range of service sectors and populations within the community. CPC for many years has focused on identifying and offsetting the root causes of crime. And we're currently in the midst of sort of readjusting our strategic direction. And we're hoping to address the foundational structures and harms under those root causes. So really moving upstream to the source instead of treating the subsequent results further downstream. So today in tonight's event, we will explore the following questions. How can we move away from a punishment mentality to one based in care, compassion, and support? How can we prevent and reduce harm by shifting the focus from individuals and communities to systems and structures? And lastly, what can we do to build a society that is equitable, fair, and just? So these are some of the definitions and terms that we might be using tonight in the conversation. For the attendees that are looking at the screen, please feel free to take a picture of these terms. I believe somebody on our team will also be adding this to the chat box for people to refer back to. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to add that question in the Q&A that will be happening at the end of this event. And today's event is a part of an Upstream speaker series. So there are two more events that are happening. One is happening June 17th. It's called Rethink Our Organizations, and that will be happening at 2:30 p.m. And then another one will be happening next week, June 21st at 6:30 p.m. called Rethink Crime Prevention Through an Upstream Lens. So anybody that sort of is interested in upstream work, what structural criminalization sort of looks like in our societies and what we're doing about it in this current time, definitely take a look and register to these events. And there's an opportunity to be a friend of crime prevention if you're interested in looking into what this might mean, definitely go into to our website that is up on the screen. And we also are on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So definitely check us out there. Okay, amazing. So format of the event. So to start off, I'll be going through a few logistics. We will also have a grounding exercise that I would love for everyone to partake in. And then from there, I will introduce our moderator for the night, who will go on to introduce the other panelists. And then after the conversation, we will have time at the end for Q&A, and we will try to answer as many questions as possible. Now, this event is a webinar, so videos or name of attendees will not be shown. The event is also being recorded and will be posted on the Crime Prevention Council website in a few weeks' time, so definitely look out for that. And in terms of the Q&A, attendees will have the option of making their questions anonymous, and the chat will not be available due to the nature of this event. And both the Q&A and the chat box is going to be controlled by our amazing tech team. So trigger warning, the conversation that we're about to have may contain triggering and/or sensitive material. Discussions around multiple forms of trauma, including intergenerational trauma, sexual assault, abuse, and mental health issues may be discussed. As well, some use of profanity may be used to fully express the panelists' and moderators' experiences and emotions. If you do feel triggered by any of this, please know there are resources to support you, and that will also be included in the chat box, I believe right now. Now, I do want to remind everyone that by being in this space, it is an honor and a privilege to share this space tonight with our panelists and moderator. It is important that we stay respectful throughout the event. Although there is limited ability for attendees to interact with us, we do ask you all to please refrain from using anything deemed hate speech, just to keep this space protected, safe, and inclusive for all. And then lastly, I did want to acknowledge the uncomfortable emotions that might be experienced throughout this event as well. And so some of the things I'll be discussing is a framework that Jessica Hutchinson sort of discussed and talks about a lot in her events and presentations, who was a facilitator at our last event last week. And I believe her handle will be added to the chat box as well. And so, yeah, so the people, you know, people might experience various emotions from listening to the stories and responses shared tonight. You know, these feelings can be confusion, being defensive, sadness, anger. You know, you might feel emotions of hopelessness, anxiety, or even shame. And if any of these feelings come up, I do urge you all to ask yourselves questions such as, you know, why does this make me feel uncomfortable? Do I hide from or put off uncomfortable conversations? Have I perpetuated racism in the past? Do I acknowledge my privilege in the spaces that I work in and show up in? And if so, what does that mean for and how I'll live my life going forward? And so it's important that we are aware of how these questions make us feel, but also the importance of really breathing into challenging and feeling these emotions is just as important. And, you know, a lot of the people that are in this space, depending on where you are in your journey, although it's important to accept your need for growth, you know, it's just as important to educate ourselves and actively practice in getting uncomfortable. And with that, I do want to put a disclaimer that, again, wherever you are in your journey, please don't go to Black, Indigenous, or people of color for advice on how to fix or support you in this process. Although there are great Black, Indigenous, and people of color in our communities that have laid the groundwork and created great resources to address the problems of things such as racism, white privilege, white supremacy, etc., it is not our responsibility to solve something we never created, right? So without further ado, we will go into our grounding exercise. So hopefully this will give everyone an opportunity to sort of be present and come into the space and be just a little more focused and in tune with the conversation that will be held.
Okay, I would love to ask everybody listening to the show right now to just practice some gentle breath work with me, and wherever you are and however feels comfortable.
Amazing. So I hope that sort of allowed you all to sort of, I guess, get that peace and really be able to come into this space with a clear heart and clear mind. So without further ado, I will be introducing our moderator for the night, who goes by the name of Ummulkheir, who I will invite to turn on their camera. Hello, hello.
Hello.
Ummulkheir is a community enabler, an equity leader, podcast co-host, and executive director of Project Up. Project Up is a grassroots initiative that provides safe spaces for young Black Muslim girls between the ages of 14 and 22 in the Waterloo region. She also co-hosts the Story Mind podcast, a platform dedicated to centering and elevating BIPOC voices. Ummi's work and life has always forced her to acknowledge and address the social barriers, structural violence, and racism that impacts people's lives. And she hopes to continue addressing, building, and creating spaces of belonging for her community in all things she pursues. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the beautiful and warm introduction, and then for setting this tone first tonight and for setting up the stage. Yeah. I'm really grateful to be here with you. Salam alaikum, everyone. Hello. I'm honored to be here with you tonight and to be sharing space with the amazing human beings that I'm about to introduce to you all. Like Shama had mentioned, my name is Ummulkheir and my pronouns are she, her. I now welcome the amazing panelists to turn on their cameras and unmute. I'm going to call on each one of our amazing panelists to introduce themselves. I am going to start with Autumn Fitzpatrick.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Autumn Fitzpatrick and my pronouns are they, them. I'm a sexual assault and attempted trafficking survivor who now runs a YouTube channel called Loving the Spectrum, and my work focuses on unlearning the ways that we view gender, sexuality, disability, and whiteness so that we can better understand ourselves, our needs, and our responsibilities to our communities. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here with us. I am going to call on Daniel Henry.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Henry. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the Assistant Program Coordinator of the ROPE program. ROPE is an acronym that stands for Rite of Passage Experience, and it is a program designated for young men between the ages of 13 and 18, and it's a 12-week program that puts them through different scenarios, allows them to understand who they are, and not only navigate and survive, but attempt to thrive in a system that was designed to oppress them. And they're not thriving because they're towing the line, but because they have a knowledge of themselves, the history around them, and the purpose that they will be tomorrow's men. Pleased to be here, grateful.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And Amy Smoke.
Hey, Sego, so Grego, I'm Smoke Youngit, Skinyoki Hagani. I'm Mohawk Nation Turtle Clan. I'm from the Six Nations of the Grand River. My pronouns are they, them, and I am an Indigiqueer Two-Spirit parent, the manager of Sadijarota, the Waterloo Indigenous Student Center, and one of the co-founders of OC Gahyu Hudaje Landback Camp in Laurel Creek.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. All right, before we get the ball rolling, I'd like to let you all know that we are extremely nosy on this end of the spectrum right now. And if we could ask you all to just quickly share your location with us in a quick poll that's about to go out. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Waterloo region, for showing up and for showing out. It also looks like we have some folks in Ontario, but outside of the region, and some folks in the other parts of Canada. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening. And as everybody was kind of sharing their introductions and bios and letting us know of the work that they're doing, I am going to take a moment to reflect on and recognize that all of us on this panel do the work that we do simply because the systems that are supposed to uphold our most basic human rights continue to fail us and subject us to structural harm. And thus we do the work that we do for the survival of our individual selves, but also the survival of our communities as well. With that being said, We had a lot of time kind of going back and forth and engaging in some conversation as we prepped for tonight. And I remember this one particular conversation really setting with me. I remember us having a conversation about our experience in being criminalized. And I remember saying that I've witnessed others in my community be criminalized simply for their identity, but never directly experiencing it myself. For example, I've never really been sent to the principal's office in school because I was seen as the model Black student. However, I kept reflecting on this question after our conversation for weeks. And I realized I was actually born into a world that criminalized my existence without me doing anything. And I've been internalizing that all my life because I was not seen as human. I started to recollect memories of my mom running away with us in the middle of the night to cross borders for our own safety. I remember having to hide my identity for quite a long time, and my mom telling us to stay low and keep quiet and not to speak to anyone as we made our way to safety to Kampala, Uganda. And remembering these memories, it dawned on me that I was not allowed to live in peace and safety, that I have truly been criminalized all my life. And with that, I'd like to flip this question back to the panel. When was the first time you either witnessed or experienced criminalization, or what it means to be criminalized? Feel free to answer this in whatever order that you would like to. And the first person that I see on my screen is Amy Smoke, so I want to call on you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I actually managed to escape actual arrest by Waterloo Regional Police until I was 29. But I was surprised at the way in which Waterloo Regional Police treated me. They were checking me out. They said stuff like, we have Pocahontas in lockup. So many of the special constables that work in that space would come and see. They wanted to see what they were talking about. And given the rates of incarceration for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit folks, there's no way I was the first Indigenous person that they had ever had in lockup. So I was really mortified at the way in which I was treated. And then beyond at Vanier Correctional, the different types of health questions that I was asked, the different admitting process that I had to go through because I was First Nations, Métis, or Inuit. In their eyes, I was much more of a criminal, that I had put myself in those positions, that I had chosen that lifestyle for some reason. And but yeah, I was actually about 29. And unfortunately, it's been just a snowball effect since then. The criminal record has grown exponentially because of that. So, but yeah, pretty much the first one to be targeted or arrested at rallies, protests, all of those things because of the way that I look.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Autumn.
Yeah. For me, I as a white person, most of my life was spent very much being decriminalized and seeing this is something that we talked about in our prep rehearsal. But for me, growing up, watching my mom and how she interacted with the world taught me a lot about what it meant to be white and what that meant in terms of us not being criminalized for very obviously just illegal shit or just bad shit, sketchy shit. That taught me a lot growing up, but it wasn't until I was 20, I believe. I was probably freshly 20 when I was almost trafficked, and I went to the police for support after initially trying to talk to Crime Stoppers instead. But I was very quickly made out to be in the wrong for being in that position. And as an autistic, queer, trans person, there were so many things that led to me being in that position. And there was just, not only was there no support or care given to me, I was told that I was being the dangerous person, that I was wrong and that I was bad. And yeah, that was at 20. but there are so many people that have dealt with so much worse from a much earlier age, specifically thinking about ABA and the trauma that young autistics deal with through therapy. I'm very, very lucky to not have dealt with that earlier. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that and for being here and shedding light on all of those things. Daniel.
Yeah, I love to tackle this question from a systemic and then going down to the individual. So viewing criminalization as a system that embeds fear and control into the subconscious of people from a young age as they grow, specifically in marginalized communities. I grew up in an area of Toronto that's the northwest end community called Rexdale. And in my specific community, I lived right beside a plaza. The plaza was kind of like the center of the block. And in a 2-block radius, there's 7 schools, 5 elementary middle schools, 2 high schools, and a community center. However, at that same plaza, there's a sign ever since I was born and to this day that says no playing, no loitering, no bikes, no skateboards, no rollerblading, no bandanas, and no hoods. I'm surprised it didn't say don't exist, don't have fun, be a robot, because this is a system that continues to embed in your mind since the day that you are born, that you cannot have fun on our land. And first of all, this is not even your land, right? This is land that you stole. However, working from that framework, seeing criminalization as that system, and then seeing people get their doors kicked in early in the morning because they're seen as a threat to the community. And it seems as if the communities that have the most policing are the least safe. How does that make sense? It really doesn't resonate with me. So I see criminalization there as a system that continues to embed fear and control, experiencing it as a Black man. As soon as you look at me, you see myself as a criminal, but then you hear me speak and you say, oh, you're so intelligent. No, keep that. I'm staying with my brothers who you're thinking are criminal. I'm staying with my sisters and the folks who you're saying are criminals. So that's how I view it. And it's a struggle, but it's a struggle that we have to face. And it's a struggle that we have to push back against, because Zora Neale Hurston says that if you're silent in the face of oppression, they'll kill you and tell you that you liked it. So I'm not telling you I like it. I hate it.
That was extremely powerful. Thank you so much. Wow, y'all are already setting the stage. Okay, let them know that you're present. This question is for Amy. How have you and your community's state of survival been criminalized? I'm also happy to elaborate this question if you'd like as well.
Yeah, if you could. I have a personal answer, and I don't speak for all of my community, but if you could elaborate a little.
Absolutely. I think when we are talking about survival and our survival being criminalized, what we really mean and what we're not talking about is the justice system or physically being jailed. So we're not really talking about getting handcuffs on you and being thrown away to jail. That's part of it, but that's not all of it. We're talking about not having the full right to sovereignty, not having safety or peace of mind as a BIPOC individual, simply because of the way you show up in the world. When you listen to the zero truths that is being shared in the media, it is clear that we as non-white, non-heterosexual, non-able-bodied individuals are not seen as human. The simple fact that I myself, as a Black Muslim woman, I'm not safe in my neighborhood to take my child for a walk without being literally terrified every 5 seconds that something harmful will happen to me and that I may not make it back home. It's a simple fact that I have a higher chance of losing my life in the hands of medical professionals who took an oath to protect me for mistakes that are avoidable for white-bodied individuals. That is criminalizing. So we're really talking about the criminalization of acts of our own survival. Even when we try to survive, it is seen as a crime. It is seen as something that is wrong. It is seen as us not even thinking that we have that right. How dare we even think we have the right to be able to survive? That being a crime in itself.
Yeah. I think of all of the examples of the ways in which First Nations women in particular, all the murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit, have been taken. Barbara Kentner was walking down the street. A trailer hitch was thrown. I got one was yelled. That was simply walking down the street and looking the way that they do. I teach my children very different ways to survive because of the way that we look. Yeah, and Indigenous women, we are 3 to 5 times more likely to be victims of violent crime, sexual crime, all of those things. We are more likely to be incarcerated just because of the way that we look. I think there's legislation that actually places us in not as a people, not as persons. There's the Canadians, the white settler Canadians, and then Indians. We're not people. So that's like a legal definition of us. So to be seen as not even a person in so many of the spaces. And then for many of us with the intergenerational trauma of residential schools, finding our identity because our culture and traditions and teachings have been so lost, led me in particular to all of the wrong dark alleys to find my identity, to search for what I was looking for. So that led me to being unsheltered, criminal activities, stealing from stores and selling it to get by, drug addiction and sex work. So all of these things led me to try to survive and then get in trouble for it. So yeah, a lot of those things just to survive. I'm a criminal because of.
Yeah, it's kind of like the stamp on our forehead as soon as we walk into the universe. Really, thank you for sharing that. Autumn, how has language been a tool for systems to justify their acts of violence?
Yeah, for me, I really, really like thinking about language and the way that we talk about things. Last May, I just finished up my undergrad at the University of Waterloo doing speech communication, and it was amazing. And I remember being in a first year class with a prof named Jennifer Simpson, and I remember like failing my first bunch of papers and being like, what? But like I was talking about the things and I just couldn't understand why I wasn't getting the marks. And then I went in and sat down with her, and she told me that I wasn't naming oppressors at all in any of my work. And I would talk about things like violence against women instead of who is being violent towards the women that I'm speaking about. And just that class specifically was about intercultural communication and how powerful communication is when we're talking about oppression, because there are so many conversations to be had, but if the language that you're using to have those conversations isn't right or isn't conveying the things that you want it to, those conversations can be so meaningless. Like if you're going to be talking about stuff like Canada's Indigenous people or our Indigenous community or whatever, like as a non-Indigenous person, like what point is that conversation if you're already starting it by acting like Canada possesses people? Like there's no way to have important conversations without getting to the root of like the language that we're using. Because even just like looking at dog whistles and how common those are now, and talking about like, I don't know, I can't even think of an example right now, but just how we've seen a switch in like our neoliberal society where it's so important to be like politically correct, or people using the term politically correct as if that means anything other than just being a good person. But just like the ways that we use language is incredibly important. And for people to act like the way you say things doesn't matter because of your intent or because you just didn't know enough at the time, like that really isn't an excuse if people have the information out here that has been educating us. Like if you have the ability to get the information that you need to have the conversations that need to be had, you have no excuse. Like the TRC exists. There are so many pieces of like policy and information, like trans people have been gathering research on like what we need. Like, so, like all these different communities have been telling people in power what we need for literal generations. Like none of these conversations are new. And yeah, it just means being intentional all the time, like doing the work to look into just like what you need to do better, and just thinking about the language that you're using, like all of the time. Yeah.
And I
Telling
think,
you, just I would like for my hair to stay in place, please. Do not snatch my hair by telling the truth all the time. Daniel or Amy, could you provide insight to how language has played a role in perpetuating violence in your communities?
Yeah, I could quickly talk internationally just about how language is used on the global scale to differentiate genocide that's happening to international communities, whether it be in Palestine, whether it be in Ethiopia. They use the term conflict instead of like ethnic cleansing, instead of genocide. And it's supposed to make it feel more palatable to the ears of those who are committing the oppression and saying, oh, there's good people on both sides. We've heard that term before. And just because of that, we have to calm down the tone that we're using to talk about this oppression. And that's something that it seems like everyone on this panel is not willing to do, because we cannot compromise our integrity by co-opting language that minimize our struggle just to make you feel good. The world we live in is centered around making you feel good. What more would you like us to contribute, right? We're all, like, even in our most active state, we're still docile compared to everything that needs to be done in order for change to happen for the indigenous communities and all the communities that are facing oppression globally. So if you are responsible and if you are feeding into the problem by using co-opting language, just check yourself, be patient with your language. Don't speak on things that you don't know anything about. Do a lot of reading. Don't rely, as Shama said in the beginning, don't rely on oppressed people to inform you about the struggles that are happening, because it's tiring. And just be intentional with your language and be responsible for the words that come out of your mouth also.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit as well. There's so many examples. Daniel gave so many of them, right? Attempted genocide, cultural genocide of Indigenous people. It's genocide. Taking babies, kidnapping babies, stealing babies for residential schools. That is the actual language we should be using. I had a conversation with a really dear friend of mine last summer when Land Back Camp started. I'm like, I don't know that I'm employable anymore. That stuff that comes out of my mouth is just, I might want to work. I don't play well with others because I call out those things, because I can name those things. It is important. Language is important. Pronouns are important. Gender neutrality, all of those things are important. I've sat on so many of those different types of committees where we're crafting terms of reference, where we're looking at mission statements. And someone mentioned, well, Indigenous people know that we mean beyond these words, that there's a different context to our words. Yeah, but some of these things aren't for Indigenous people. They're for white people. They're for white institutions. And if you're not very specific about what we're doing, don't acknowledge the land. Don't talk about being in a decolonizing, space if you're not actively working to dismantle those systems. Don't ask me how to write a land acknowledgement if you're not actually going to do the work that comes behind it, right? Because those are just words. It's very performative. So there are a lot of things that I speak out about that folks, someone said something about, well, I don't know, we can hire Amy because of their social activism shit, because of their social media. And I was like, well, that's just too bad, because we have been smiling and shaking hands with a lot of white city officials, with a lot of police, RCMP for a very long time, and it has gotten us nowhere. So, for me, I'm just calling it like it is from now on.
Please continue to call it out for what it is, because I think the more we continue to call things out for what they are, we are recentering our own power and our own voices. And we're also constantly reminding everybody that needs to be reminded of clearly, who's been sleeping, that we're not gonna no longer minimize our own experiences, that and the pain that we are constantly enduring at your hands. We're not going to continue to allow for that to occur. And I also think when we use co-opting language, we allow for bystanders to empathize with the oppressor and criminalize the oppressed. It's what's continuing this cycle of harm. We're not calling it for what it is. So therefore it doesn't exist. It only happens within your mind, within your sector. doesn't happen in the real world because it's not, there's no language for it. There's no descriptor for it. So thank you all for that. Daniel, what has 2020 and current events taught you about transnational solidarity and collective liberation? Also, could you please elaborate on what we mean when we say transnational solidarity and collective liberation?
Absolutely. I would say most recently, the terrorism that took place in London, Ontario, by a young white supremacist that was whitewashed by the media is an example of, although people don't identify with the Muslim community, they can still call out terrorism that happens on behalf of Canadians, because as we know, and we should not lose sight of the fact that racism, and I'll say this slowly, racism is the cultural fabric of Canada, right? Built upon it, and I'll repeat one more time, racism is the cultural fabric of Canada. So international, transnational solidarity is if you're not from a community, but you are still if you're still anti-oppression, I'm standing with the communities of all those who are oppressed. That's Indigenous communities, that's Muslim communities, that's LGBTQ plus communities, that's all marginalized communities, no matter where they are. Because if not, then I am standing for their oppression. So 2020, I'll share a quick story. It was October, it was the height of the second wave that was happening. And although I went to school in Waterloo, I moved back to Toronto just because it was a better environment for me to be in. But despite the fact that it was the height of the pandemic, I saw police officers in my region riding around on horses and ATVs trying to survey the population and let them know that we're watching you. You know, you can't go outside and breathe fresh air. You can't do this. You can't do that. And I was like, shouldn't there be something else that y'all should be doing right now instead of walking around the community like some RCMP officers? Like, granted, we already know the Toronto police budget is, I mean, we don't even get to talk about Waterloo. The report came out yesterday. But it's important for us to stand with oppressed folks, because if not, then we are advocating for their oppression. And the examples I would give is the terrorism that happened in London, the news that came out in Kamloops of the Indigenous children that were murdered, and many other events that take place on a daily basis. If you search, you'll find them. You know, there's news coming up every day about how white supremacy has, you know, been uncovered. You know, it's kind of like a present. Every day you wake up, oh, there's a box of white supremacy. What's in the news today? So just transnational solidarity, just standing with all oppressed people, the international struggle of Black people, Indigenous people, and all minorities.
For the sake of our audience, I'm just going to snap every time you all answer questions rather than just full on applauding and standing up in my chair, just letting you all know. But thank you for dropping all of those gems. Amy, when your community holds people accountable, how do you uplift rather than condemn people to offer opportunities to learn?
Oh my, so before 1492, right, there was no cops, there was no prisons, there was no homelessness, there was no poverty, there was no all of the things. We had restorative justice, we had circles, we had accountability. Harms done by one individual affects the entire community, and we bring them into those circles. Reparations are made, restoration occurs with the community. It's a communal thing, right? To be expelled, to be banished from that community is like death. It would be so shameful. It would be so horrific. And that like rarely happened because there was no crime, because there was none of that. So the restorative practices that we have used since the beginning of time really allow for more accountability. Like for myself, like I got to go to jail and sit there and eat 3 meals a day in a warm place and shower and all that, and then go back out and do it all over again. I didn't say sorry to anybody, wasn't accountable, I wasn't responsible for any of the things that I did. I didn't have to face anybody. It was not rehabilitation whatsoever. So I think the ways in which First Nations, Métis, and Inuit folks have come together as a community to support. The circle is done in a very particular way. People speak first for very particular reasons. I think that we need to really be looking at the ways that the penal system, like all of the institutions designed to punish, it's very punitive. There are reasons that people are doing the things or creating that harm, right? Isolating them and sending them off to solitary is not going to help. They are actually in need of care and concern. And banishing folks to figure it out on their own is not helpful to anybody. So the restorative justice and the systems that we've used, the circles that we create for our community, so much more beneficial for everybody.
Absolutely. It's the collective mindset of we are together. You're not on your own. I really appreciated the way in which you said a single person's act is affecting the entire community, and it's deeply felt within the community. And I think I very much resonate with that because that's my own cultural practices back home as well. I remember my mom and my grandmother telling me stories about what chiefs and like coming together and clans and clan unity look like for us in our community. And I remember my grandmother precisely saying to me, if someone from one clan was to harm someone else from another clan, and our clans were divided based on villages, and our tribes were divided based on villages and where you were in the land. And the two communities would come together, share a meal, and exchange a bride and a groom, because now there's blood between the two communities. Mm-hmm. So you're now family. You're not going to harm your family. You're not going to do anything that is going to be hurting your family. You are together and you are one. And it was really difficult to kind of hear about that, because that sounded so beautiful and picturesque, and recognizing that that's not really the reality of the world that we currently live in. It's more so of the mindset of let's strip you of all that you are, and not allow you to be able to actually grow from this experience, and then shame you so that you can go back and do the exact same thing, and just continue on perpetrating the cycle because we benefit from it. It is important for you to do this so that we can continue to benefit from it.
And I think one other thing I really love to point out too is that a lot of the decisions made in many of our communities were made by the women, were made by the matriarchs. We had it all figured out on the ways in which family, works together and those communities work together. So the women really did a lot of that decision making. We could pull a chief out of their position if we needed to. Those are the types of things that women played a big role in and no longer do. So
that sounds like a very civilized society to me. And I hope and pray we get to that point in time in my lifetime. Daniel, are you able to share your experiences as well?
Yeah, quickly adding two quick anecdotes. One, talking about the collectivism and how it's powerful, but using an example in nature, if fish are swimming in a school together and one fish deviates from that school and an earthquake happens underwater, the fish that's alone will die, but the energy of the collective school of fish is enough to withstand the earthquake. If we individualize our struggles and disconnect parts of our community from each other, there's no way that we could stand up to white supremacy, to these systems that are designed for our failure. And our communities are only as strong as the weakest, poorest, whatever they want to call us, part of the community. So if that person is not healed or restored to whole, then we face no chance. That's one thing. Two, talking about the reactivism, and reactive, I mean like the way that the governments are reactive to the problems that are happening in our society. And they rely on, we have to rely on ourselves in order for change to happen. The ROPE program is spawned because the government of Toronto was reactive in a sense that mass shootings were happening in 05, 06. And it's like, after that, they're like, oh, maybe we should give money to the community so that they can fix the problem. So they give money to a bunch of different organizations. The ROPE program is birthed from that through the brilliant brains of my mentor, Mickey Hutchinson. And from that, the funding ends in about 3 years. So they wiped their hands clean. We did all we could, right? We gave you the money, but now it's up. So then after that, from 2010 to date, he, along with brilliant mentors that are from the GTA region, continue to give their own time, their own money to continue to grow these young Black men. And I'm so glad that they continue that, because if they don't continue after 2010, I'm not able to join in 2014. So the community really has to rely on itself in order to nurture and grow the young ones to become the activists of tomorrow. So I'm just so grateful for the collectivism that I was a part of from a young age, and hope to continue that going forward.
Absolutely. I also think that really draws on the point of collective liberation. When we really talk about collective liberation, we're talking about that togetherness, that centering of community, that going back to community and reinvesting in community and standing alongside community in all that we do and all that we are. And also recognizing that grassroots initiatives are the most underfunded groups and individuals that actually do the work, that actually get the results, that actually move community forward. And of course, if we need people to be oppressed, we can't fund their freedom. So we'll just leave them where they're at. However, I think the brilliant thing about our community is the spirit that our communities have in constantly reinventing the wheel and constantly investing back in ourselves. And I can resonate with your story for Rope, because Project Up came from our community. It was just a bunch of us not really getting a clear sense or an understanding of where to go in our lives, because we were the first generation to graduate high school. What is post-secondary? Our parents fled war to come to this country for us to find safety and for us to be able to have futures. And when there's nobody in front of us to direct us or to tell us where to go, we were really just stumbling and trying to figure it all out. And we started to see the next generation of young Black Muslim girls look up at us and say to us, hey, I'm also graduating high school this year. I know you're only in first year of uni, but how did you apply for OSAP? What courses did you take in grade 12 to be able to get into your program? What other programs are available? And it really just started with us sitting around each other and circling back to each other and just sharing the littlest bits of information that we had from each other. Like, oh, hey sis, I heard so-and-so did this and this is how they got into their program. Well, I did X, Y, Z, and this is how I got into where I got into. And we started to kind of see our young people coming together and wanting better for themselves. And then it was our moms who literally had absolutely nothing, opening up their doors for us so that we can come together and meet together in their basement. It was them putting together $20, $30 for us to be able to go buy a bunch of boxes of pizza so that we can have poetry night, or that we can have a space for us to be able to kind of artistically express ourselves. It was our moms who were talking to local mosques to open up their gym doors for us so that we can play basketball in the spaces, because there was nowhere else in this grand region that we live in where we saw ourselves or we knew we could go to and we'd be safe to be able to be ourselves. And just so grateful for the spirit of our community and the ways in which we're constantly showing up for each other, and just so glad that we come from a space, and so privileged that we come from a space that is collective in the ways in which we show up in our community. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And just the last point, I would say that we appreciate all the work that the matriarchs have been doing in our community. And we're just trying to catch up to y'all, because y'all have been holding it down for centuries upon centuries. So give us some time. I think next generation, we got y'all. We're going to be holding it down for y'all.
Oh, we definitely will. So excited for the future. I also think in our conversations, we're really recognizing that immense harm is done within these systems that are supposed to protect us, these systems that are there to uphold our basic human rights, but unfortunately they don't see us as human. That's another conversation that we'll get to. But recognizing also that healing never ever happens within these systems, but always happens within our communities. I want to pose this question to all of you. I'll start with Autumn. I'd love for you to talk about your community and the transitions you have made to conserve your peace and energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the past year before the pandemic started, I was finishing up my role as the VP Student Life for the Waterloo Undergraduate Student Association. So this is the Undergraduate Student Association at the University of Waterloo. And that was definitely one of the worst years ever. Work-wise, I've never hated everything more, just working within the system and like, especially being elected and spending time campaigning and thinking the things that I wanted to do, and then getting into what I thought was one of the most powerful positions that I could actually start doing the things that I wanted. Then they were just like immediately like, not only can you not talk about politics at all on your social media or on your free time, you're not allowed to go to any protests, any rallies, or any political events. Like, do not talk about Palestine at all. Don't touch that topic with a 10-foot pole. That's what they told me in like my recruitment weekend. Just like all of the things that I've been wanting to do were immediately like, that is not what you're here for. You are here to uphold the organization that already exists and not change it. And they only ever tell you that once you get in, and then they make you sign a contract. Like, the idea that someone will hire you for a job so that you can change that job is wild. Like, just, and it's just like sad because it's like I knew I had a feeling it was going to happen, but it's just like getting in and seeing that in person and knowing that making those changes from within the system isn't possible is really saddening. And it just it really helped me to realize pretty much just like how fucked everything is, and just that like it's not even just this one organization, but doing just like work in nonprofits or just like trying to do any social justice equity type work in places that you need donations from like funders who are inherently profiting off of your oppression. Like, how is it possible to like kind of get up from there? So yeah, that year very much helped me realize that working from within the system was not only not good for me, but I was not able to do good things for other people. And that literally just being in that position was actively like making me regress in my politics, because my job was literally like trying to force me to uphold this thing that already existed. So I knew that I literally needed to get out as soon as the date of my position was done and not do that work again, because once you let yourself believe enough that you can change the system from the inside, you will get stuck in there forever, because you end up putting in so much time into changing the system that you're like, oh, but I've already put in so much time. I have to keep doing it from within. And for me, it was realizing that sitting on the hiring committee and not being able to get the person that I needed to like not hired. But as soon as I left that position, I joined a social media campaign and got them fired within a week. Like, that was very much just like, never again. Only from the outside, only ever being chaotic from now on. Like, just you can't tear down oppressive systems with the same tools that were used to build them. It's simply not possible. And letting myself realize that like being my truest self and being able to, for one, just like come out as trans, realize I was like autistic and disabled. I wasn't able to do any of that from within the system. It was only once I left that I could even figure out who I was. Like, I didn't even have this name last year. Like, being within those systems is so violent and damaging that like getting out on its own is a healing experience. And then realizing what your goal is and what you want to do with that work outside of the system, and then just finding other people that are also doing that work is so incredibly healing. And I can't thank like my community members enough for just like not only like helping me feel like my only value wasn't just in the work that I was doing for those organizations, but also that like I deserved to leave and get out and do things for myself too. And that taking care of myself is also a radical act.
Yes.
And just healing is important, and we all deserve to have it.
On the audience, I said I wasn't going to clap, but I'm clapping because that was extremely powerful. Thank you so much for taking care of yourself, because honestly, centering our own existence and allowing for our truest identities to show up is resistance. Like, that is us literally throwing up the middle finger and saying, well, I'm going to be me. So you take it how you want to. That is a you business. I'm not going to lose sleep over. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Amy.
Wow. So yeah, the past year, right, I spent 184 days on the land. I was the only land back camp member that didn't go home, and I lived the closest. Being on the earth, my gosh, changed so much for me. I do come back to the University of Waterloo every once in a while. I take these little short-term contracts. Sean Johnston and I switch jobs every once in a while. I do that only because the Waterloo Indigenous Student Center is my safe space. Like Autumn, you know, I cried my way through my undergrad, cried my way through my BSW, got to Laurier and finally found an Indigenous-led and created and taught, developed program. But yeah, it's not something you can do. And I get tired quickly here. I'm almost grateful that my employment is just the short-term contracts. It allows me to do the work that I need to do at Land Back Camp. And then prior to that, I worked for Laura May Linto, MPP Laura May Linto, which was an amazing experience. And yeah, it taught me that I want to be on the protest side, not on Queen's Park, not on the Hill. I could never be in those spaces. I need people like Laura May in those spaces, definitely. But it certainly showed me the types of system that we work in, the types of system I want to burn to the fucking ground, right? We're not talking about just changing them from within. We're talking about dismantling them all together. So that was a great experience to learn that, you know, and kudos to Black, Indigenous, racialized people who do that work. I spent one afternoon in the house with Ford and drove home like white knuckled, just unbelievably shoulders up. It took me like, I don't know, 3 or 4 days just to de-stress from all of that. And I thought, and Laura May's going to get up the next morning and do it all over again. And I was absolutely astounded and in awe of the people who do work within those systems, who make the changes that they do. It's probably not for me, right? I'm not going to change it from within. I want to burn it to the ground.
I'm with you on that. But this is being recorded. Daniel.
Yeah, for me, it's coming to terms with these new terms that I had never interacted with before, have not been exposed to it, and unlearning a lot of things and realizing that you have to put up boundaries and blockers, whether it be blocking out people, whether it be blocking out pages, whether it be ingesting media that helps you relive trauma that you've gone through, PTSD, and just making sure that you're centered in yourself, because I feel that I cannot help those who need help if I'm like off balance, you know. I really need, like the term I used was, is my chi centered, you know, and making sure that I am in a good frame of mind to be the most beneficial and the most useful to the community that I hope to engage with and I hope to defend, not speaking for them, but just advocating for their struggles, their trials, their tribulations. So I can't add on to anything that Autumn and Amy said any better than just making sure my chi is centered.
Absolutely. No, our communities need a full us, not anything less, not anything more, just a full us and showing up as we are. That was so powerful. For me, and speaking about community, I always associate myself with my community. I am my community is me. We're like one and the same, because our collective, because we have a collective experience in the way in which we show up in the world and the things that we're constantly experiencing. I do not have the option of not standing in solidarity with my community. I don't have the option. I can turn off my social media all I want. I can turn off my computer all I want. But what is happening around me is forever and always going to affect me. I don't have that privilege of disassociating myself from these experiences, or any community that is experiencing any form of oppression. I know for me as a Black Muslim woman, my identity allows me to be able to really walk across so many different communities. However, there is nothing like the feeling of being seen heard, represented, and upheld by another Black Muslim woman. Like just being able to see someone that looks like you, that has that shared experience as you do, just does something to the heart and soul. And I want to ask you all, what does it mean to you to stand in solidarity with your community? I'll start with Daniel.
Yeah, for me, I would say that first it starts with making sure that the elders in our communities don't have to work past the retirement age, because then their energy is not used to continue to nurture the younger generation, but it's used to continue to keep up with this rat race of capitalism, that they escape their homelands, or if they were born in this country, they grew up to kind of like seeking a better life. So continue to help those who are on the higher end of the age bracket, just so they can continue to nurture. In the middle, it's making sure that we're questioning ourselves, our intentions in everything that we do. Standing in solidarity with my community is not laughing at a coworker's joke because it's funny, even though it's hella racist. Like, that's not funny at all. So standing in solidarity with the community is calling that out, eliminating yourself from that space, removing yourself from that space, because if you're not with us, you are against us. For us, it's continuing to get the word out about the ROPE program. Been going strong since 2007, and to date, we've graduated over 100 boys. So that transition from youth to adulthood is necessary, and our societies in the past had rite of passage programs, had development programs that used to help us in our journey, our transition to adulthood. But now we think that going to school and getting a high school diploma is the transition to adulthood, and it really isn't. So I'll continue to get the word out about the program and supporting local programs that are similar, like your program, Project Up, because that's a program that's helping youth, young Black Muslim women between ages of 15 and 24, and ushering them into a world where they have more knowledge of themselves and are able to be better community members. So continue to get the word out about local programs that they can support, whether it's financially, whether it's referring people from the community to those programs, whether it's volunteering, whether it's sending money for funding, grants. And because sometimes these things are very hidden and they don't want you to get the funding. So they got to put it on the 50th page of Canada.com. So we got to make sure that we're really sharing the resources with our community so we can benefit. And just being honest, like, it's not okay for you to be a racist, but if you tell me that you are racist, I'm gonna respect you more than someone who's calling me out behind my back and acting like they stand with the struggle and they really don't care about it. So being truthful and honest would be how you stand in solidarity with the community, because by you accepting who you are, people can challenge you and change can manifest that way. But if you are living a lie, there is no change. There's no change.
And I also don't think no one does not know what it is that they are. I think you just choose to hide it for your own benefit. Amy.
Oh, so, standing in solidarity with my community is meant so much to me, most recently because of the erasure of Two-Spirit indigiqueer folks in the Indigenous communities. Like, we weren't a thing before. Someone asked me once when I came out, like, so how long have Two-Spirit people been around? And I was like, since the beginning of time, since people lived with people. There have been queer people. There are queer people all over the planet. So watching youth in particular really start to take that up. I'm 45 years old. I didn't actually say the words, I'm a queer person, till I was like 38 or something. I mean, I always knew. Folks in my spaces seem to always know. And in our community, it's not something like we don't come out. I didn't announce it on Facebook or anything. We come into an identity. There's no closets in teepees or longhouses. So that wasn't a thing for me, like, have you met me kind of thing. So that kind of energy, and if I'd had the language and the tools and the support and the people and the role models to have, shaved off 25 years, so watching the 16-year-olds and the 14-year-olds in land back camp in particular say for the first time, I'm a queer person. transitioning, taking new names, that is so empowering. And for me, it's about passing the mic, right? Like Sean and I are like, perfectly happy to sit in our lawn chairs and get fed food and someone bringing me a blanket kind of thing while I watch the youth really take up their space. I think that we have always, we don't really acknowledge that the youth teach us, right? That there are teachers to us as well. My 7-year-old teaches me more than I teach them on a daily basis. My 21-year-old teaches me more than I've taught them. So I think really honoring and respecting the youth in our community and standing in solidarity with them, uplifting their voices, amplifying their lives and experiences is so important. Yeah, it's a really great feeling to be witness to those types of moments. And then again, like even more broadly, standing in solidarity with Black community members in KW, showing up at all the things that we do for each other, right? We know that Indigenous sovereignty is bound up with Black liberation as well, right? They are so intertwined. It's never going to happen without each other. And I think that that's really important. Land Back Camp is filled. We have Afro-Indigenous folks that frequent our space. And I think that our collective solidarity is so important to making such a big difference. Like the revolution is now. Folks have got to get on board. Be on the right side.
Or you will be left behind. Autumn.
Yeah, I think just like remembering that all of our oppression is so interconnected that it's not possible to do them one at a time. And just like the separating of different kinds of oppression, not only is it just unhelpful, but it erases the truth of what those are. Like, just like Amy was saying, like acting like there weren't two-spirit people before, like trying to separate queer issues and trans issues from Indigenous issues, like that, it doesn't make sense. We need to make sure that we're doing all of these things together. And also just like, for me, interacting with other like white, disabled, neurodivergent, queer, trans people, healing is one thing, but accountability is way more important. And I think especially among like white, queer, trans people, white, disabled people, especially like when they're white and more things, there is such a push for like talking about our issues and what's going on with, but like not nearly enough talking about how much our whiteness supersedes literally everything. Like, no matter how oppressed a white person is, they are white before literally everything else. Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting for me realizing I was disabled and like trans at the same time. I realized them the same day. And when I was first like figuring shit out, I'm like, oh shit, I have so much more to deal with now. And then very quickly I got into like the autistic TikTok space and then realized, oh no, I'm actually not more oppressed at all. I was just like realizing how much more white I was than I realized by looking at just like how little accountability there is in so many white marginalized spaces. And it was just like seeing the way that like so many of us were unable to like acknowledge the way that whiteness impacts your experiences of other kinds of oppression. I'm like very much so focused on like making sure that other white people that I'm around are not only talking about their own healing, but also talking about how they need to be focused on accountability and how like their experiences of trauma and oppression are not excuses to continue to put that onto other people, and like making sure that that's not something that I'm doing as well. Like, I'm not separating myself from like other people in that, because like we all just like need to be doing better and just understanding that all this stuff is connected, and that like whatever community that you are a part of, you will have some sort of privilege in some part of your identity, and like recognizing that like in the communities that you're a part of makes it a lot easier to properly heal when you're also recognizing the places that you've also harmed.
Absolutely. Privilege is intersectional. So is oppression. Like, we don't show up in the world as just one singular identity. We show up in the world in our full selves. Yeah, all of the things that you all said are just I'm telling you, I really just want to keep my edges laid, but thank you so much for tearing them apart. We see public and private sectors partnering up to address issues in our society, especially now with all of the movements and all of the uprisings. Do you think that more systems partnerships should occur? And I think what I particularly mean by that is that there's a lot of nonprofit organizations that are more so set and have existed for quite a while, specifically in our community, that are hoping to like connect more with BIPOC communities and reach out more to those grassroots initiatives that have been ignored since time immemorial. Do you feel that more of those kind of connections and partnerships should exist, and we should be engaging more in conversations to really get a better sense and understanding of how we can work alongside each other and work together? I'll start with Amy for this one.
Wow, that's kind of a complicated thing. And just in speaking about some of my own experiences with some of the organizations, Waterloo Regional Police, or the institutions that have inflicted so much harm, when I'm reached out to by people, by certain folks, by different organizations, I'm just like, yeah, I just can't do it. I personally don't have the emotional energy and labor to partner with, you know, the police. I will not be a part of that system. I am a defund ACAB kind of person. Abolish. That is, you know, the reality of the policing system, right? The RCMP was created for this reason, was to erase and kill me and get me out of the way. And it's continuing, right? So, you know, when I have institutions, and I've had several this week reaching out and saying, oh, it's National Indigenous History Month, and I'd really appreciate the opportunity to have you educate us. And I was like, what did you just say? That I should educate you? I don't have time for that. You don't pay me enough to do that. It doesn't make you accountable also for your own learning, for your education, for the work. If you come to me and say, this is what I'm doing, this is what I've done, is there any kind of guidance you can provide or help me find a way kind of thing, I might consider that. But, you know, just in some of the queer spaces I've been in when it comes to institutional, that's not my job. Like, I just feel like it's hard to partner with some of the structural places that have continually oppressed and harmed. And again, like I was saying earlier, like this week has been full of apologies. My friend Sean Johnson put that out on Facebook today. The week has been full of apologies. We need to stop harming each other, the structures that are in place. And for us folks that are doing stuff on the ground, we're not even a nonprofit. We're like just a group of people setting up a tent and exercising our treaty rights. So when folks want to work with Land Back Camp in particular, we're very careful about that partnership. We're very careful about the ways in which that organization can do good. How can we do good with each other? You know, Kafka, we're working with Kafka this year. That's a wonderful organization. They want to empower, uplift, amplify Black, Indigenous, racialized folks in art, in all those things. So we're selective about the people that we work with because of those structural harms. And, you know, it's a daily thing. Yeah. And this month, like, you know, someone said something, I've had it a few times. Can I pick your brain a little bit this week? And I was like, what? No. Have you seen the news? Like, what kind of precious bubble do you live in that you don't have any idea what's going on in the world? Yeah, this is not the time to ask for free advice, to ask for free guidance and free education. No. But I could probably point you to somebody that would be, you know, more supportive of that. It's not me though.
No, we have to protect our energies at all costs. It is your responsibility to educate yourself and learn. It's nobody else's job to do that. Daniel.
I love Amy's response. It's like, it's ripe with revolution, and it also like echoes a lot of the things I wanted to touch on, because one, a lot of us get wrapped up in the idea that the representation and the positioning of marginalized people, I call them the dominant society, because if we're being like real, like the minority is the oppressive and the majority is the oppressed. So the dominant society is, and we feel that by putting these people in positions of chairs of boards or professors or police chiefs or this will solve the problem. And I mean, how many of y'all put a black square on your Instagram last year? And since then, what has happened? Like, there's been more black killing, there's been more violence, there's been more poverty. We're talking about a community in Toronto specifically that is the premier's tier, and not saying any supremacy needs to happen because of that, but is underfunded when it comes to COVID vaccinations and getting out like protective equipment. So you need to stop positioning yourself in a way that I am working with this community and putting people to make it seem as if change is happening when they are indoctrinated with white supremacy and will continue to uphold that superstructure. So first things first, we have to stop this idea that representation is the be all end all, because representation at the end of the day does absolutely nothing. It's the boots on the ground, it's the grassroots organizations, it's those who come with the willingness to want to learn and want to not only learn, but take that information, because knowledge is useless without action. And take that knowledge that they get from people like Adam, like Amy, like Ummulkheir, like myself, and use that to affect change in their immediate space, and then broaden it out, widen it out. Because if your home is racist, where are you going? Making a social media post, making it seem as if, oh my goodness, I feel so much for the 215 indigenous kids that lost their lives. Stop it, man. It's all performative. It's not going to work. It really is not going to work. So we got to start with being real. We got to be real, but we also have to make action and not make performance our framework when we enter these spaces, and solidarity all across the board, making sure that we're standing with all those communities. But yeah, I can't echo that enough. Like, if you are on this Zoom call right now and you feel as if because a marginalized person is in a position of power that change will come, I'm here to tell you that you believe a lie.
That one just required a moment of silence and some snapping. I don't even think I have nothing more to say to that, so I'm just going to leave that one alone. Autumn.
Can you repeat the question again?
Yes, it's really just centered around what does it look like for us when we have conversations about partnerships, more specifically, more structured and centered nonprofit organizations reaching out and hoping to partner with grassroots initiatives or individuals that are on the ground actually doing the work.
Mm-hmm. I think also just like making sure that your organization is already safe before you start having those conversations. Like, I'm not saying equity and inclusion trainings are everything, that literally not, but like if you haven't at the bare minimum trained literally everyone, every single one of your employees on just like the most basic anti-oppression stuff, there's no reason you should be like emailing or asking people to like provide you free educational resources. Like there's absolutely no reason for that. And like, I've definitely been at fault of this in the past. Like when I was at WUSA, I created an AVP equity position. And like the goal of that was like to try to get more equity stuff included. And obviously one position in an organization that I already knew was awful and that I was incredibly excited to leave is not going to do anything. But at the time I was like, oh, well, at least if we have a position, I'll feel better about it. And like that's really all that position has ended up being, like, to make us feel better about the fact that, well, at least we have this position. And like, I've been talking to like the person that I had originally hired into it, because they're like one of my best friends now. But it was just like, I had to be like, I'm very, very sorry for like, for one, creating that position, but also for putting you in that position and like making you do that work. Like, I'm really glad I paid you, but I'm really fucking sorry I put you in that position, like in the first place. And it's really hard to realize that you've done that. And that like something that you thought was really good and like a step towards making like the system better, sometimes all it does is hurt the person in that position. And like, it's it's really, really gross. And like a lot of organizations really need to think a lot more about why they're doing the programming they are. Like if it's just part of your organization, or if you just have a single position or a department, ask yourself why you have that position, department, program, or whatever. And if it is actually to make meaningful changes, or if it's to make yourself feel better about not doing the bigger things.
Yeah. And also, is it about thinking that this is a trend? I think with COVID and social media and kind of the world feeling very close and very small, I get the sense or this feeling that some folks think this is just for the time being. Like, we're just in this for now. We're going to go back to the way things were. You know, I'll carry on my daily life of not being checked and not being, being told the truth and not having to constantly unveil myself and pause and learn and really reflect on what the hell it is that's coming out of my mouth. Because it's just for now. It's just something that exists for now. There's no real genuineness. There's no real care, and there's no real investment in our communities. If you're not invested in our communities, please stay away from us. Leave us alone. Let us be in peace. We are happy just as we are. If you're not invested, if you're not ready to make meaningful, authentic connections and relationships, if you are not ready to unleash your humanity, if you are not ready to reach the next step and the next level of your existence, where you recognize and celebrate someone else's existence, stay in the corner that you were in. Your ignorance was my absolute bliss. Because you now knowing about this and wanting to come and apologize and internalizing all of this shame and then continuing to center your voice does not do me any justice. It just allows me to get more gray hair. And I like for my hair to stay as black as possible because I'm not even 40 yet. Leave me alone. Amy?
No, I was just thinking about, the good intentions of folks. Yes. Right? If your intentions don't match the impact you've had, then you're doing something very wrong, right? Good intentions were residential schools. Like, if it does not match the impact, you're fucking it up, man. You need to rethink those intentions. And yeah, like if you're not gonna help me, if you're not standing in solidarity, amplifying and empowering other folks, then just get out of my way.
Yes, stay in your corner. I think collectively what we're really getting at and what we're really saying is that it's about genuine care and genuine investment. And if that's not your calling, if that's not how you're hoping to enter this space, and allow for the individuals that have already been doing the work to continue to do the work, because your presence only checks off a box for you, and it makes it evident and it makes it known what your intention is, which is not a good look, because you can get dragged very, very quickly, and you would not want that for your brand. But I think, so this is my last question for you all. And I will say that this is absolutely my favorite question, not because it's the last question, but I just love the nature of this question. Don't tell the organizers this, but what do you all hope to see more in government? It can be municipal, provincial, or federal. And I'll start with Autumn for this one.
I think we may have already alluded to this in some way, but like abolishing the police, that should be top of mind. Defunding needs to start like ASAP, like yesterday. And if you're still not understanding why abolishing the police and not just like fixing it isn't enough of an issue, like you need to spend a lot of time doing some very deep education, because that should be just obvious at this point. But just like it just feels like the government has been doing so many things badly that it's hard to give a list of things to change, because it's almost just everything. Like, first resign to like most of them, just quit your job and stop. I'm just like, they're doing everything wrong right now. So it just feels like so many things, like maybe start caring about people. Yeah, I'm very much just like so many parts of the system just need to change that. Yeah, I think that's where I'm at right now. I'm just very much like everything needs to be burned to the ground, and we need to only be listening to the most marginalized people when we're building things back up. and creating the new things that we actually need.
Yeah.
That's what's up. And on that point, I would like to say, like, connecting back to something that I said earlier, like the height of the pandemic, police officers are riding around the community on horses and ATVs. Like, I don't understand what's happening here. People in the community are eating canned foods. We don't have access to fresh produce, yet so much funds are being directed and funneled towards those who are trusted to ensure the safety of marginalized people. Like, no, we got to stop that, right? And we got to make sure that those who are in positions of power are reflecting the points and what needs to be done in the community. Like, more green spaces need to be enacted. We need like safety on our roads, whether it's bike lanes, whether it's like, we need to make sure that the spaces and the funding to our schools are adequate and teachers are extremely stressed. Like Autumn said, the list would be exhaustive if we were to list everything. And politicians might be listening to this and be like, oh, we can start our political platforms by doing this, and that would be free. So we're not going to give you that list. But what we can do is ask you to read the sources, because we have blogs, we have YouTube channels, we have websites that have resources that you could use to potentially help the people that you are entrusted to because you're an elected official, and start from there. And then we'll rebuild without y'all, because y'all are gonna die in a couple of years anyway. Most of y'all are old. These politicians I'm talking, not those on our panel, but once we can get that out of the way, we can hopefully rebuild a holistic society that really accounts for all those voices.
Absolutely.
All the things, like, huge props to everything that everybody has said here. Burn it all to the ground. You cannot decolonize something that is inherently colonial, right?
Yeah.
We're already using the wrong words. You cannot decolonize. We had systems here. We had political systems. We had economic systems. We had kinship structures. We had those, and they worked very well for us, right? Prior to colonization, like I said, we did not have climate emergencies. We walked quite softly on Mother Earth. Prior to colonization, we were doing just fine. I think revitalizing the systems that were once in place on these lands is what should be done. Give the land back, and not just symbolically. It is the ultimate solution to all the things: poverty, homelessness, food security, all of the things. The police, I completely agree with Autumn. I got fined for being at an anti-racism rally. I sit on the anti-racism advisory working group, man. They don't pay me enough to pay the fine for doing the work on the ground. And the police increased their budget by $8 million. They've spent $5 million on that, just policing the pandemic. I think there's a strategy there, right? They're going to spend $8 million. They will spend that money that they asked for. And they're running the COVID vaccination task force. Police shouldn't be running anything at all, but certainly not the health and well-being of the people. Abolish, revitalize the systems that were once here. We were doing just fine prior to colonization. I think we really need to look at the knowledge of the First Peoples. Why wouldn't you ask the people that have been here since the beginning of time how we did things, how those worked for us? Because they worked very well. And then even, the United Nations was taken from the Iroquois League of Confederacy. Those types of structures, y'all like to rip off those things, but never give any credit to that. The American Constitution, right? Kind of taken from the Haudenosaunee. I think that there were obviously things we were doing right, things they wanted and took credit for. The only thing they don't take credit for is white supremacy, right? They built it, they called it, and now they don't want to take care of it. So I think, let's start with the police, RCMP, Waterloo Regional Police Services, and then revitalize the structures that were here and were working well for us.
Absolutely. Yes to every single thing that came out of all of you. I would also like to add that showing up to be a civil servant as a politician means that you're constantly thinking about and acting in the best interest of the community. This means that when we tell you what we need, you're listening and not turning around to tell us you don't know where to start. If that is the case, I really do need you to reevaluate the purpose of your role as a leader. I also would really genuinely appreciate it if you stopped asking Indigenous communities and individuals what they need. There's an entire report called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's Call to Action. Please read it. Stop taking up space, genuinely listen, and act accordingly. Thank you. But yeah, that wraps up our session. I would like to sincerely thank you all for sharing space with me today, for sharing your wealth of knowledge, and for the amazing things that you are all doing to uplift our communities. That is it for our questions. We are going to be taking about a 5-minute break. The Q&A is open for folks to send through their questions, and we will respond after the break. I also would like to let folks know that my apologies in advance for not using completely inclusive language when I say things like snatching my edges. So if you have any questions about the type of language that I'm using, or if there's any way that I'm able to explain to you what I mean by certain things, please also ask in the Q&A. And I'm happy to explain that. So yes, with all of that, we're going to take about a 5-minute break, and we will be back to answer some questions. Everybody about a minute or two to come back from break before we start getting into some questions. I'd also like to let you all know to please continue to send through your questions as we're answering as well. Okay, is everybody ready for our round of questions? So the first question is going to Amy. Someone had shared, are there common misuse of language that we or I can correct? Is there like a common use of language, a common misuse of language that I or we can correct? And the example is Aboriginal is still sometimes commonly used and instead of Indigenous people. Addicts, convicts around nouns, but are there other ways to shape conversation well?
Yeah, so, and, you know, Jessica Hutchinson really offered a lot of real great insight and information around language when it comes to the prison system, when it comes to those types of things. I can speak to some of the words. Aboriginal, that's a word that the Canadian government decided I should have. I am Ummulkheir, you know, my friends are Anishinaabe, Cree. If you know the person's nation, use that. First Nations, Métis, and Inuit for me means Turtle Island, means around here. Indigenous is a sort of a broader term. I think that connects us all by oppression and colonization. So the first peoples, there are first peoples to every continent on the planet. So I think using the words like I am Ummulkheir, I am Haudenosaunee, I'm Ummulkheir. So there are words that we use. If you know them, use them. It's like pronouns. If you know them, use them. Call me by my name. That would be great. You don't have to struggle with those things. I have a name. But, you know, stuff like Iroquois, Aboriginal, Indian, even those are the words that government gave to me, labeled me. We talk about Indian when we talk about the Indian Act. Aboriginal, we talk about, you know, Section 35 of the Constitution. Those are the types of things. That is their language. That is their verbiage. Try and use the correct terminology. But if you don't know, ask the person. I have community members that prefer to be called Native peoples. I have community members that prefer to be called First Nations or Métis or Inuit, specific to them. I think it's specific for each person, and asking is always a good idea.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Amy. All right, this question is for everyone. Oh, sorry, before I say that, someone mentioned a really great point that I'd like to share. Intention is one strategy that can be powerful. The impact of the intention is something people need to pay attention to, because I have good intentions is not enough if I hurt others by the impact of my action. Need to pay attention beyond thinking the reason behind is wanting to be a good person. The only story we know is our own. We are responsible to learn. Yes, absolutely. And this, again, this question is for everybody. Would love to hear the panel's perspectives on being woke and what it means or doesn't mean to them. So what does being woke mean to you, or what does it not mean to you? I see Daniel smiling.
Being woke, I studied aviation at the University of Waterloo, and we learn early that if you are sleep deprived, you cannot function as a pilot, right? So all these people who are woke need to go to sleep because they're not operating, they're not using their brain capacity to fully recognize the problems that they're hoping to identify with and stand in solidarity with because they are tired. So all you woke people, please take a nap. Go for a hiatus. We don't need you right now, but once you become refreshed, then we can use you for our cause.
Yes.
Did you see both Autumn and I were like, the little eyebrow thing went up. Are we really going to answer a question about being woke?
Feel free to answer it however you desire. So I'm guessing it's a...
Daniel's answer was great.
Everyone go to sleep and then wake up when you are refreshed.
Right.
Yeah, literally just as soon as you think you know everything and that you're this perfect person that can do no wrong, do no harm, there's no way I'm a racist, I'm an ally, or blah, blah, blah. That's as soon as you've lost. As soon as you have this idea that you have unlearned all that needs to be unlearned and that you're now perfect, that's when you have the biggest ability to do harm. So just like remembering that you will never get to this point of like knowing everything and like not having to worry about hurting others anymore, you'll be much better off. Because just like realizing that these things have been ingrained in us since birth. Like it takes time to unlearn things when it's literally everywhere. But yeah.
And the titles that you give yourself do not really dictate what someone else experiences. You may be sitting around in the corners thinking you are wide awake, please put the caffeine down, like Daniel had said, and that you are an ally, but in reality, you're actually continuing to perpetuate harm because you're not pausing, you're not stopping, you're not being intentional about this process. You are not asking questions. You are not genuinely and intentionally trying to grow and learn in fully standing in solidarity with communities and understanding what it is that people's experiences fully are. So yes.
Yeah, and I think like why do people call themselves ally? Did someone tell you that you were? Because you don't get to call yourself an ally unless we tell you. And it's not a noun, right? It's a verb. You must do the things. I'm bigger on be the accomplice, be my co-conspirator, because I need you to drive the getaway car. If I'm going to be maced for water, I want you there. I need that white shield. Like with the black squares, right? The orange circles right now. And in 20 days or whatever, you're going to celebrate Canada Day. That is not being an ally, right? You need to think about that. We can call you what we need to call you when you're doing the things. It is not a noun. It is an action. It is something you do alongside us.
Yes, yes. And it is a title that you earn based on your actions. You don't give it to yourself. Absolutely. Someone said, do you believe there is a possibility that all groups can come together and work to holding each other able with compassionate action? What is a hopeful comment you can share so we can leave to create action?
Yeah, I could quickly just give a short phrase, and Amy alluded to it earlier in the conversation, but we cannot become well, we cannot heal in environments that we were caused harm in. Like we can't get better in a system that we were harmed in. So the system has to change. And until that system changes, that we'll continue just to peck on wood and hope to break a tree down. But I don't think much will happen. But I would say that if we're talking about a hopeful comment, then you would say that the change is within, you know, continue to purify your heart, continue to act as the person, the model citizen who you claim to be. And if everyone does that, then we would have this utopia. But until that, then I would say that nothing's going to happen.
Absolutely.
I think, like for me, okay, so for like human beings, like I'm not talking about race or anything, like I think human beings are the only creature on the planet that's forgot its original instructions, right? All the other creatures and all the other things are doing their thing. They're doing all the things they were supposed to do. We've forgotten. So many people have forgotten. You know, when we as First Nations people, Métis, Inuit, when we play music, when we play that drum, right, that heartbeat, Mother Earth, go sit down on Mother Earth for a few minutes. Ground yourself for a few minutes. Remember our original teachings, our original instructions. We've gotten so lost. Remember what those birds are doing, what the trees are doing, what all living creation is still doing, and they're supposed to be doing, right? Look what we've done to the earth in 500 years. I think we've forgotten our original instructions.
Yes. Autumn, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think you all both said everything. Yeah, for that one.
Yes, I am in full agreement. It looks like we've got a few questions coming in as well. Thank you, everyone. Please keep them coming. Sorry, I have to fully read this now because the other questions I had read before, but it's a comment, it looks like. It is when I'm doing work, when I miss my, I'm so sorry, I'm going to mispronounce this, but I will.
Cree.
Sorry?
Yeah, Cree.
Thank you. The most as I know there is wisdom found there, as I am a person of the land, the secret can be found on Mother Earth. Hear, hear, Amy. Absolutely, absolutely. Yes. There was mention of how representation in agencies or powers of position may not hold any meaning. Recently, I've seen a trend with agencies focusing on diversity, inclusion, and equity roles, sometimes an HR role specializing in inclusion and culture, and sometimes working action groups. Is there any way to enrich these roles, groups relating to the power of change with spheres of influence, nuances of today, of on-the-ground direct change in the first session last week? I'm hopeful, but at the same time, do not want to be delusioned. Or can this vary based on intention and impact? Thank you. This may be a big question and repetitive to our discussion. So I think the question is recognizing that there's a trend with agencies focusing on diversity and inclusion and equity roles. Is there any way to enrich those roles and groups relating to the power of change with spheres of influence?
Yeah, I was definitely just like thinking about that since I was talking about that position that I helped create and how that was just unhelpful. But I was trying to think of like what other things you can do with the positions that currently exist. And I think making new positions means that work is like belongs to one person instead of spreading that work out into where it actually currently exists. So like literally if like this stuff takes work and that's just how it happens. Like none of this stuff is going to be easy, but even just doing something like looking through literally all of your job descriptions and figuring out where equity already is in that. Like how does each individual position already interact with marginalized communities, and where's the harm that currently exists right now, and how can you make sure that every individual role is doing everything they can to make sure that like anti-oppression is just ingrained into all of them, and like not making it just about like a one position or like sending this one specific position to go and do all the different committees and all of that stuff. Yeah, it's honestly, I think it's really hard to work with it the way it currently exists because like, as I said, just having the one position is inherently going to be harming the person in that role. Yeah, I think just like trying to move away from the sequestering all of the equity stuff into one specific person or area, and just making sure to be very intentional with all of your roles across the board and making sure that those tasks or just like the intent of everything is rooted into everyone's position all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll quickly add to that about like a tempering expectations, because if it took hundreds of years for the system to develop and flourish to the best of its ability, it's not going to take a simple position at a university or a police force or any other structural body for that change to be impacted to everyone in the organization and society. So don't be delusioned by thinking that this one role will change things, but think that we have to think big picture. Over the span of X amount of years, if we continue in this trajectory of becoming awakened to the struggles that various folks are facing, then we will transition to a society, a universe that is working in harmony with how it was originally designed.
Absolutely. Sorry, Amy, just want to make sure you don't have anything else to add before. Nope. Fantastic. Yeah, and I think to add to everything that you were all saying, it's not a race, it's a marathon. It's not about checking a box, it's about actually doing the work. If you, like Autumn was saying earlier, if your organization is not a space to even begin to do this work, you're not even in a mindset, you're not ready to even start to scratch the surface of doing this work, please leave poor folks like myself alone, who genuinely care about doing this work and who genuinely care about seeing results, because we will stop you in your tracks and tell you that you are not ready and need to go back home and do your homework. And also, we're not fixers. That's not our role. We didn't create this system. It's not our job to fix it. And there's no fixing it. There's tearing it down and starting from scratch. But there's no fixing it. So don't put that on our shoulders, because like I said before, I really do not want gray hair early on in my life. I think this is a comment. Thank you. You are also remarkable. You have challenged me and I appreciate this evening. I will make a commitment to you all to continue on learning path so that one day I am called on an ally through compassionate action. Keep leading, keep speaking. I heard you even though sometimes it was hard. Thank you for that. Someone else had also shared that they would really want to know what is each panelist's organization is doing for structural violence or for anti-racism. So this individual wants to know what each of the organizations that we are part of is doing for structural violence or for anti-racism work. I mean,
I can start first. Yeah, so I'm not really part of an organization. Currently unemployed and doing just like freelance stuff like this and the YouTube channel. But yeah, just trying to be like intentional about all the things I'm doing and not having my personal life be like, obviously I want to have a work-life balance at some point, but like not separating who I am in my daily life from who I am in the work that I do. Like my values are the same across the board. So I want to be very intentional, especially like with the YouTube channel and like making sure that we are talking about all the things all of the time and not just talking about disability or not just talking about polyamory or queerness or transness or whatever. That whatever conversation we're having, we're talking about how our whiteness impacts that, how our thinness impacts that, like all of the different levels of our identities are important, and just making sure that the work that we do is intentional and just being intentional about what we're doing. But yeah, I'm currently just like in a pretty bad burnout phase. So I don't have as much content on the YouTube channel or like coming out as much right now. Still trying to just like heal my energy and stuff right now. So yeah, just trying to do that. And like in this time of healing, just like figure out exactly what I want to be doing and making sure that like I know what my goal is for whatever platform or work that I'm doing.
absolutely. Yes. And thank you for creating those platforms. I am subscribed and the content is phenomenal.
I appreciate that.
Daniel.
Yeah, going next, I would say that like trying to, what's the term I want to use? Trying to like stop the public school to prison pipeline in young Black boys is one of the ways that the ROPE program works to affect change in the community. I read an article just yesterday that talked about there are more Black men in prison today than in 1850 that were in slavery. And that goes to show that like we're progressing on a path that is a lot worse than it was before. But we think because we see all these activism groups and people in roles that are speaking out against oppression that things are getting better. So don't drink the Kool-Aid. don't drink the Kool-Aid, and understand that things are deteriorating, and we're trying our best to let young Black boys become aware of their purpose. And they come from a line of revolutionary history. Like, your ancestors did so much so that you could be here today, and you are not going to be taught that anywhere else. So it is our duty to make sure that we are making you conscious of the history that you come from, so that you can leave and lead a legacy that will be influential to those in the future, and just continue to expose them to topics that they've never really discussed about, whether it be just personal coming of age with their own being, their sexuality, exposing them to things in the financial area, because wealth is trying to be like, they're trying to hide wealth from us. So expose them to things at a young age, and also various careers that they might not have even think of, because they're kind of in these spheres that limit them in saying you can only be this. The representation that we see on the screens are that of entertainers and not of activists. Like, we do a session where we show pictures of different prolific figures, modern and historical, and everyone knows who Lil Baby is, but no one knows who Dr. Cornel West is. So continue to reframe the mind of the youth so that they're aware of those who have done and paved the way, and so they can continue to live that legacy. So that'll be some of the work, and just continue to unlearn too, because as mentors, we know that we don't have all the answers, and our youth call us out. We like, yo, you said this, and it's like, oh man, I apologize for upholding a system-wide supremacy to you, and I appreciate you for being vulnerable with us and sharing with us that this was not right. So just continue to learn and not think that we know it all.
Absolutely. Amy.
So we're still talking about what is each organization doing, right?
Yes.
I can speak for like Landback Camp, we are just existing. We're exercising our treaty rights, just being Indigenous, unapologetically Indigenous and queer on the land. My existence is the resistance. That is a very real thing in our space. So, we fight off the racial violence, the gendered violence in the spaces that we're in, but we're doing our thing. We create safe, brave space. Sean and I are trying to do that. My contract is up in 15 days at the University of Waterloo. So what are they doing? I don't know. They have a human rights and equity and inclusion department for which like Indigenous initiatives is under. I don't think that should be a thing, right? Indigenous initiatives, anything Indigenous should be its own thing. So, they probably, I don't know, HREI probably does like workshops and stuff. I don't know. We in this space create that safe space again. I don't spend a lot of time on main campus, right? You find your spaces in these structures, in these institutions, you find your people, you get through it. So I can't really speak to the entire university as a whole, but in the Waterloo Indigenous Student Center, students come first. Their needs are first. We close the doors if we need to, when we mourn, when we grieve together, when we feast together. We do that for our safety, for our survival, and to revitalize and rejuvenate together. Can't really speak to what the main structure is doing, but we continue to just to create brave, safe space for Black, Indigenous, racialized students here in WISC and at Landback Camp just existing.
Absolutely. Thank you for doing that. And I think for me, recognizing again that there's really no clear lines between personal and professional, and that all of the work that I do, both as a professional, whether it's Project Up or whether it's in my work in equity, or having the opportunity to be able to co-host a podcast that elevates and centers BIPOC voices, just recognizing that my simple goal and my simple mindset and framework in the way in which I show up in the world is really just centered around how can I continue to amplify my community's voices? How can I continue to center our existence? And how can we kind of take that power back and recognize that we are full as we are. We have always been and will forever be more than enough, and that we are brilliant, and continuing just to kind of hold the mic while my community goes ahead and does the phenomenal things that I'm so fortunate to be able to witness them do. So the last question is, there's quite a few questions that are coming in, but I want to also be very, very mindful of time. So I'll take, I think, one or two more questions. There's a question for Amy specifically. Amy, how do you feel sitting at various Indigenous advisory circles and speaking the truth and about your trauma or your community's challenges? Do you feel satisfied with the action that the government or policymakers are taking or trying to bring justice and equality? What's your hope?
Oh, yeah, that's a thing, right? and my partner in crime, Sean from Landback Camp, we talk about, we hope we are the last generation to trot out our trauma, to cry on the shoulders of the oppressed and show all the trauma, to get what we need, right? That has to stop. We are not all about the trauma. We are not all about that. We have much beauty in our people, in our youth, in our culture, in our music, in the food, in the ceremony, all of those things. I really hope that this is it for that trotting out the trauma stuff. And then even when we do, they like to, it's the white tears. They like to cry about it with us a little, and then they move on. A lot of times I sit in places where they've asked for Indigenous input, and then they do the other thing. Right? They completely ignore what we've told them. They've completely ignored what the community right in front of them is telling them time and time again. Or we call it the preferred Indian, where they find somebody else that says what they need to hear, that placates them. It's more palatable for them. I am not the Indian that's going to do that. I will be talking about genocide. I will be talking about murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit. I don't bring out my drum and my feathers and my regalia to be in those spaces so that you don't hear me and you don't listen. And I'm also a huge advocate for paying Indigenous advisory circles. I don't have the time to sit on all the things. We don't have that privilege. I have kids to raise. I have a camp to run. I have the things to do in my community. Elders, when they get together for these types of circles, they need to be paid like PhD rates. Right, that knowledge is profound and deserves that compensation. The time and the energy that we give to these types of advisory circles, they need to be paid. They need to be compensated fairly and adequately and proportionately for the knowledge that they're imparting. And people usually just extract that knowledge and twist it around somehow or not listen at all. So I'm not often thrilled with having to sit on these types of committees where there's not adequate compensation, and where they don't do the things that we suggest anyways.
Absolutely. Let them know. Yes. If you're going to ask for all of the things, make sure you are ready to properly listen and act accordingly. Yes. With all of that, it looks like the rest of the comments in the Q&A are just kind words from folks. Thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts with us. And I would also like to say thank you to all of you for sharing this space with me and for engaging in this phenomenal conversation. I want to just leave us all with a simple remark in that we can be appreciative of the land that we are, the country that we are on, and the history that we have. And we can be appreciative of each other as individuals. However, we must acknowledge, address, and take action against atrocities. That is just a simple fact of our existence. I leave you all in phenomenal spirit, enjoy, and salam alaikum. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone. That was amazing. And a quick reminder for everyone to quickly to note that this conversation is going to be recorded and it's going to be put on our website. And there will be a feedback survey that will be sent out to everyone to sort of fill in, to let us know what we could do better, but also letting us know what you liked about this event and any information that you'd like to share with the panelists and the moderator. But yes, thank you so much, panelists, moderator. That was a great conversation. I know that everyone learned so much. And with that, I hope you all have a great night.
Nyawa, yo.